I am honored to share the stage with three CEOs who I've had the privilege of knowing most of my career as I look back on my career. Three individuals that honestly I watched as I grew in real estate in this industry and did my best to emulate many of the things that they did as leaders. And then I've had the opportunity to meet Bill Shopoff just in the last couple of months when we put this panel together. And I have to say that it is this group. I honestly wish that we just had the camera backstage for us the last 30 minutes. And at dinner, we had dinner together last night as well. And it honestly underscores exactly what real estate is in my mind. And I think it's kind of the perfect start to the day today. The banter, the conversation, the sharing of information, we're not going to talk politics, but then we do talk politics that comes up has been pretty amazing. So I'm excited for this next 45 minutes. Thank you, guys.
Are we going to talk politics? No.
I mean, I think that we should. Raise of hands. Who thinks we should talk politics?
Oh, gosh.
Well, we do have a few.
Yikes.
I don't know. High stakes and bold moves, strategies for the next era of real estate. Today's real estate leaders face growing pressure to modernize, optimize, and differentiate. Innovation at the executive level means more than just trend chasing, which I would argue that we have been doing a bit of in the real estate industry this last cycle. It's about building infrastructure that supports both profitability and experience, whether it's AI integration, which I feel like we've heard way too much about, but we need to continue to learn more. I think this last 15 minutes talking about the perfect balance between science and human, which is what I always said about revenue management 20 years ago. It's not, you can't just set it and forget it and let it go. And that's where AI is today. We have to figure out what that human element is. Data-informed decisions, cross-functional collaboration, and strategy are all key and strategy are all key and important to know where we start and where to draw the line. During this panel, the four of you are going to share how you're rethinking everything from investment implementation to drive strategic change for the long haul. So we're going to jump in. I do want to ask our first question to all of you. Every leader on the stage has lived through multiple next eras of real estate, but this one feels different. What is fundamentally different about the decisions you're being asked to make right now versus just 5 years ago? And I think comparing, maybe we were talking about this at dinner last night some too, maybe even comparing a little bit to the pandemic. What is different today, Walt, than 5 years ago?
You know, we're managing buildings and we're managing people, and now we're managing technology. From my standpoint, we've added that third leg that is difficult for somebody who's been in the business a long time and thinks about the way that things have operated, and now where are the next parameters going to come from, and who do we put our faith in from a platform perspective? Because we have so many options out there, and compared to 5 years ago where the platform was stable and now it's not. And so we are making choices about who we're going to be doing business with and what the evolution is going to look like in this next phase as we dive into AI centralization, platform consolidation, getting rid of the old platforms, adding new ones. A lot of tough decisions.
Yeah. David, how about at Waterton?
Yeah, well, comparing to 5 years ago, just think about, and we were just talking about this in the green room back there. 5 years ago, our business was extraordinary. I mean, the appreciation of multifamily assets had been going up on a 10-year streak. And, you know, probably 5 years ago, we were coming off maybe 15, 20% appreciation, all driven by low cap rates, and lots of rent growth. today, 5 years later, it's the opposite. We've had pretty poor rent growth. We've had cap rate expansion because of higher interest rates. And so Waterton, along with all my peers, we're trying to figure out how do we grow our net operating income. So it's all about growing net operating income. That's how you're going to create value. It's not going to be because interest rates go down. I mean, that would be nice, but we're not betting on that. So that's improving margin. And so in 5 years ago, we were not under any sort of pressure to use technology to meaningfully change our operating margins. Now we're all like very interested in trying to figure out how can we perform better? How can we generate more margin? And we just happen to be in this new era, as you mentioned, of all sorts of great technology, particularly AI, that can do things in place of humans, and all sorts of other technology that don't necessarily save you expense, but give you better customer experiences, which leads to better retention, better renewal increases, better occupancy. All those types of things improve margin. And so, right now, as Walt said, it's just navigating the jungle, like the exhibit hall here of all the different vendors, all the different ideas that are out there that can help us generate more margin. And we're treating it carefully, but we're also very hungry for it. And so I think this is as big a window as I've seen in my career as far as technological advances. And now we're forced as an industry to take advantage of that.
Well, I would say to speak about that is that we're dealing with a different workforce a bit than we were 5 years ago. These people have been through COVID, they've worked remotely, or they've worked through that process. And I heard a customer the other day said, I'm now having to think more about the mental health and wellness of my teams. And she said, I've got people leaving or asking for time off for their mental wellness. She said, I didn't worry about that 5 years ago. She said, I worried about it, but I didn't have people asking me for that. So not only this technology that's invading everything, but also how our people and our people on site, et cetera, workforce is dealing with it, managing it, all that.
Look, I think the business is one that now we've got this sheer volume of information, a lot of data. We have access to an infinite amount of data today. I'm easily the oldest guy up here, and I'm start talking about my career when I went out to do site selection years ago. First thing is you actually went out to do site selection. You got in the car, you drove, you went down to the store and you bought an aerial map. And that's how the business was when I began my business. My career's, many decades ago. Now I've got all that information on my desktop, all that data. I want to distinguish between data and information, because I think the overwhelming thing today for my employees and the people we do business with who are trying to put capital with us is how do we decipher all that data and turn it into actually knowledge? And I think that's the number one change from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in my case, 49 years ago, is things are very different. The speed at which decisions need to be made to make that margin, because we're all trying to make margin. I'm in the development side of the business more than the long-term operational, but we're trying to figure out how do I deliver a site that can be built on and be competitive in the set today. And so I've got to go gather all of that data and try to turn it into knowledge. And I think that's really, for me, one of the most challenging things is, I've got decades of experience, but that experience is useless if I can't process that information faster than my competitor. And so that's really where I find myself today is the benefit of a long background of experience and the detriment of it at the same time.
So what are you, and I would argue this is still a little bit of the art and the science with anything technology. So 2 follow-up questions for you, Bill. One, what are you using to better leverage that data, aggregate that data, get it into the hands, maybe in your hands or your team's hands?
Well, I mean, we're just starting to, we're using AI and different people in the firm are doing it differently. But even now, like our analysts are using it to build better spreadsheets, because the reality is that the machines can build it better than the best people. If I was in my organization 10 years ago, even, I was maybe one of the best spreadsheet people in the business, in our business. That's not really the best place for the CEO to be, by the way. Now I'm capable, but I don't want to do it. I want others to do it. What I have is a talent where I can see where there's errors in the spreadsheet. So somebody will put a big multi-page spreadsheet up, and I'll see a piece of output, and I'll say, you have a problem. I don't know what the problem is, but you got a problem, because I can't trust your output. If I see one problem, that whole spreadsheet is completely useless to me. So I think it's trying to figure that out. For me, it's trying to take my team members, and fortunately they're younger than me and have more skill at trying to do what they're doing. But it's grabbing every piece of technology we can and trying to understand how to implement it. I was grabbing breakfast this morning with a gentleman that's integrating payment processing with a couple of the different providers that we know. Like anything we can do to make our jobs easier, and it's not really our jobs easier. I'm speaking like I actually know anything about what these gentlemen and ladies do, but I think anything you can do to make the customer experience better, because we're selling a place to live, but really what you're trying to sell is a lifestyle. And if you can make that lifestyle easier, I'll give you an example. My son moved into a new apartment a few months ago. And before they moved into that apartment, all he could tell me about is he wanted to buy a house. Now they moved into this new apartment. They're like, we have no interest in a house, because we got everything we wanted in the customer experience. They got a grocery store downstairs. They got everything they need in their systems. Everything's on their phone to manage their lives. And they're pretty happy with that. So I think if you can deliver that as ownership, as managers to the customer, you're delivering that. In our case, what I'm trying to deliver is the master plan experience, where we're going to drop a building in that master plan experience and deliver lifestyle to people. So we've got a big master plan project we're doing right now, and we're delivering retail, not because we want to deliver retail, because there's no money in the retail. I mean, it's not like no money, but the retail land's worth less than my cost basis. So the value of that retail is, if I can deliver the right experiential retail to deliver a nickel or a dime in rents, that's creating broad value across the entire master plan. So trying to figure out the things that connect with end value versus, thinking about everything has to make the most money.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Kendall, I'm going to pivot to you just based on what Bill was talking about, resident experience and data. So Grace Hill sits on a mountain of data, and thinking about it from a number of different angles. One, how do you know, how can Walt, David, Bill know exactly what residents are looking for, and how can they leverage data? But then more importantly, and I think that this is probably a really big gap for us, more so today than in the last 5 years, is the training piece. So the 3 of you can build it, but that doesn't mean if you build it, they will come, right? And the training piece of it that I think that Grace Hill can help with, but also that data you sit on. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try not to do a commercial here. We do have a booth, so feel free. I think it's talking about the integration. I mean, that's what Grace Hill does. I did start on the operator side, move to the supplier side, many years ago. But and Bill said it, it's data and knowledge, but I would also propose it has to be action. It has to translate to that. Otherwise, it's a mountain of data. Nobody knows what to do. You are limited by the analytical skills of your community manager or your building manager or whatever. So you have to have something that tells you what to do. That's what AI can do. So, David and I were just talking backstage, we've sort of built this platform where the survey results come in from your residents, and then it can kick off training. It can kick off a best practice. It can do, so can you do these workflows where you're using that feedback? The feedback has to be statistically enough so that you get, you don't want to hear from the loud few or, good or bad. So you've got to have enough. So I would say, people go, oh, I get another survey. We all get those. Even, the doctor appointment I had Friday, I got a survey, I got a dining experience, whatever. We get a bunch of them. So we've got to think about the cadence. I don't always get it. Yesterday I played in the RETCON golf tournament. My doctor's office called for my survey in the middle of my golf game. I'm not going to stop and do that. So sometimes it's not that I don't want to do the survey. It's an inappropriate time. So we got to do that often enough. And then I've got to our residents and our tenants have to know that I'm going to do something meaningful with that feedback. Do they believe me that I'm going to use that feedback to do something important? Gosh, based on your feedback, we've fixed the potholes in between building 3 and 4. If I see that, then I'm going to believe you that if I give you feedback, you're going to do something with it. Again, it has to drive action.
So, Bill, we were talking backstage, and as you're talking about data, I want to hone in on one thing that you said. You specialize in seeing value where others see distress. So coming into an area and really looking at master planned communities, developing them for a purpose, right? So delivering that resident experience or delivering the residents to the retail tenants as well. But you made a comment about sitting down and explaining the value, throwing you a curveball here, but sitting down and explaining the value with local businesses or local landowners, property owners, homeowners. Talk about that a little bit, because I think that that's some of the art that we have to make sure we don't lose in real estate.
Well, I liked your comment earlier. My success is a match of art and science. I mean, I have a lot of skills that I've developed, but I'm not going to get replaced by a machine. I think there's still a lot of skills we've learned, the soft skills that are important. And I think one of them is, we do land use and we do it in one of the hardest markets in the country, which is in California, I think is certainly up there. And we figured out how to do it very successfully. I can say, knock on wood, that we've never not gotten a project approved in the state of California. So hopefully I didn't jinx myself by saying that out loud, but we do that by getting engaged very early with community leaders, the politicians, but you also have to deal with the neighbors. And I think we were talking about affordability earlier, and I said, if I could come to your neighborhood and I could show you how I could build homes for 20% less than the value of your home, the likelihood is almost nobody in this room would raise their hand and support that, because you own a home and I would diminish the value of your home. But we've been able to empirically show people that actually if I build infill product next to your 30 to 50-year-old home, that your home is going to go up in value. And all of a sudden I take people who would oppose a project and they become supporters. And we bring all the other reasons why. The other thing we've done is we quit talking about people. You go into these established neighborhoods, and I used to talk to people about, God, if you let us build, that's a place where maybe your children could live near you. And I figured out that hook was not enough, but I figured out a hook that would work. That if your grandchildren could live nearby, and that distinction, by the way, swayed people. I mean, I just got a multifamily project, 80 unit to the acre project, dropped in the middle of 7,200 square foot lots. We put townhomes nearby, but we took a 4-acre parcel and put 400 units on that, 5-story product next to 2-story homes. and we got it done, and we didn't get a single opponent to that project. Well, we had one. The mayor tried to appeal the project and couldn't get a second out of his council. So that is done by building that relationship, but it's also by sharing that knowledge. It's sharing that information with the neighbors so that they don't feel threatened, that they actually feel like they're going to get something out of it. And in this case, we also brought affordable housing into the project. We focused on seniors. It's a little less controversial to people. And so you're trying to find those things that sell to the community.
So, Walt, if Bilt is, and Bill mentioned that he really does the project development on the front end, not necessarily a long-term operator. So if we're comparing this to, Bill is building the hardware, you're running the software, the lifestyle at massive scale at Avenue 5. That software layer is where the customer experience truly lives without losing that human touch that I think is so very, very important. In industries like airlines, hospitality customer experience is no longer peripheral. It is fundamental to the business. So how do you think about the role of the resident experience in the evolution of the industry, and what feels genuinely underdeveloped today, if anything is?
Well, what we've evolved into thinking today is that we need to be taking repetitive tasks off of our people so that they can spend time on the resident experience. And so centralizing tasks that historically have been done by a apartment buildings team, and most likely moving it off the site and centralizing it, and having that centralized team using AI. And so all of a sudden you're getting 3 or 4 times more productive. And then your team then has the time to go execute on the resident experience that we're selling to our residents now. You know, we've, with the example of Bilt and other platforms, we are selling the dream of this resident experience, and now we have to execute. And, you know, that's where the challenge is. It's training, it's educating, it's getting the right people into the right roles, and taking advantage of this opportunity with as few platforms as possible, which is why we're talking about, you know, resident apps and whatnot, so that we can deliver in this environment that David brings up a really good point, where we haven't had appreciation, and all of a sudden now we're chasing, we think we're going to get some NOI out of this opportunity with centralization and productivity. And if it all comes together, it could turn out to be a very good thing for the business.
And along those same lines, so David, I feel like through this last cycle, there was a lot of chasing value add kind of early on in the cycle. It got kind of quiet around the pandemic. And I would argue, I guess, or maybe I would ask, from Waterton's perspective, from your perspective, is value add today all just cosmetic, or is some of that value add digital, to Walt's point?
Yeah. I mean, certainly upgrading kitchens and common areas and fitness centers and things like that are still in vogue. I'd say the challenge with it is a renovation now is so much more expensive than it was, say, 8 years ago. It's probably doubled. And so if you're renovating, full-on renovation with new flooring, kitchens, could be $25,000. You're going to need $400 plus rent premium to get, that 15 to 20% return on that investment. And so I think that's harder to do today in this environment because of, where people are financially, where incomes are, affordability, et cetera. So technology, I think, is really an easy way to create do value add, and it can be in all sorts of ways. It's when you think about the technology in credit screening and fraud prevention, what a great investment to reduce your delinquency. We'll take it where we can, and so that has been an important investment. Using like a platform like Bilt, which processes with us a couple $100 million in rent so far, and allowed our residents to redeem points, millions of points for airlines and Hyatt hotels and wherever. I mean, what a great value add to do that and reward our residents, and as you guys say, make rent fun again. So I think that these are great investments that we can plug in. Create that margin I talked about, create additional net operating income without spending $25,000 in an apartment to do a full-on renovation, which we're doing them still, but it's market by market. Go to Austin, Texas. That's very challenging to do today. You're going to do that and have to give 2 months free to rent that thing. So that's not going to make sense. But certain markets, it does still.
So, Bill, you deal with institutional partners, and I would say complex exits. Is that fair? Just based on the product that you're delivering? Is that yes? Yeah, fair. In this high interest rate environment, everyone is looking to de-risk. How has that impacted how has it impacted the exit, and is it also impacting how you build and develop on the front end, knowing that buyers are looking at things a bit differently than they probably were 5 years ago?
Let me say a couple of things there. First of all, historically for me, this isn't a high interest rate environment. This is below the midpoint of my career. So I came into the business at an 18% prime rate. So I think that you can make money in this business in any interest rate environment. It's just we've had a little bit of a combination of challenges: high interest rates, inflation. Because you can get rent growth, but you might have expense growth exceeding rent growth, particularly in some markets with insurance and taxes and some other things are really kind of not really controllable. But look, the capital stack has changed in the last couple of years. When rates went up, largely because the private equity funds have exposure in these buildings that haven't really done much. And if they're in the development pipeline, they have exposure to buildings that may or may not be worth what they've got in them. There's a reasonable chance they're upside down in those buildings. And so the private equity world went risk off. And how they solve for that is to instead of, if I were developing a normal cycle, I would have a 90-10 equity partnership with private equity. I put up 10% of the money. They're putting up 90%. We go get a construction loan and we go build a building. That doesn't exist right now for very many developers. The majority of it is now pref equity. Maybe you can get pref equity to 85%. So now the developer's putting up 15% of the overall stack, not 10% of the equity. Well, what that means is twofold. You got a lot more capital to get a deal built, but it means you can do less deals. So even if the deal's penciled, your capital will only go so far, unless you've got limitless capital, and very few people in this business have limitless capital. Look, we're all limited by capital to some extent. So it's made it more complicated for us to build our capital stack going in. Just recently we think there's land value back in our apartment land. I bought the first piece of a site 3.5 years ago, and we pro forma the land at $125,000 a unit exit. So it was heavily multifamily footprint on the site. Markets changed. Maybe that land was worth $50,000 if it was worth anything. 2 years later, we've pivoted that project now to where it was 80% for rent. It's now 40% for sale because the for sale product is way more valuable. I can get our values have come back where we'll probably exit that land at maybe 110 today a unit. So I'm getting, 10 million an acre for multifamily land in Southern California, rounded, but I'm getting 12 to 15 million out of the home builder. And I can get a single take for much more land than I can do. You can only build, I got, this particular project, we've got 1,400 units. I can't deliver 1,400 units to the market in one fell swoop because I'm going to self-cannibalize. I can never get it leased.
Right.
So, trying to figure out how to not just maximize value, but maximize present value in the master plan environment is become more challenging because people are not believing the exit as much as they did. And so, like I said, to capitalize this land acquisition was fairly complex and done candidly with very little institutional equity, no institutional equity, institutional pref equity, institutional debt. And my equity stack was all high net worth to do a fairly large, it's a, $400+ million capital stack to go through the land. And that was all done with high net worth.
With high expectations.
With that money has a higher expectation than the institutional money.
It does.
Less patient. And money is not patient. By the way, if anybody wants to talk about patient capital, they're not talking about any capital that I've ever met.
Right.
Because I don't believe capital to be patient.
Particularly private equity. No.
Okay, so we have less than 10 minutes left, and I'm going to do a lightning round, 2 questions that I'd love for each of you to answer. So first one, and Bill, this was kind of a perfect kickoff to this question. As longtime industry leaders, what is one belief or operating model that you've had to unlearn to lead effectively in today's environment? Walt.
Staffing plans have completely changed.
That is a great one.
Empower my young leaders.
You go.
That spreadsheets should be eliminated.
I think we lived in an era of post GFC that we got really used to. Lots of capital, and we're back to normalized interest rates, to your point, and a normalized capital environment.
Okay, next question. In 2030, we will look back at 2025 and say, I can't believe we used to manage buildings without knowing blank about our tenants. Or I'm going to give you a choice. The next era of real estate will be won by organizations that finally get what right?
I would say the blend of technology and the human. That's one of the things I think we need to get right.
Yeah, using technology to provide exceptional services.
I'm going to say that same kind of blend of technology. One of my friends said, he's telling his young members of his organization, you're not going to get replaced by AI, but you're going to get replaced by somebody else who can use AI better than you.
Yes.
I think being able to predict outcomes at real estate investments will be what we didn't have now that we have then. Being able to predict how long people are going to live where they do, how long a lease they're going to sign, what their incomes are going to be. Those are all things that I think we'll take for granted in 5 years that we stumble around on now.
That's very interesting. So I'm going to add my 2 cents. So while I completely agree on staffing plans, we as an industry have, on the multifamily side, have traditionally always said the 1 per 100, and we have no idea how to stray away from that. We're also open. Your traditional office hour. You're almost like banker's hours. And that is not when people are looking for apartment homes. And I would say, and Bill, I would say probably the same thing on the office side for sure. But even when we look at our construction sites and how we're doing things, and we have not evolved as we're building buildings exactly the same way, right? So kind of thinking about the people piece of it. But I love the comment on AI, and it's not, you won't be replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by someone who actually knows how to use it. Yeah. All right. Well, I thank you so much for joining us on stage today. And as I said, Walt, David, Kendall, I've had the opportunity to know and work with you and watch your careers for the last 20 plus years, not to age anyone, but is what it is, right? And Bill, it's been amazing to get to know you and really look forward to, I think we need to keep this group together, because I can promise you the banter with this group, I am not kidding, has been some of the most fun that I've had on a panel so far. So thank you guys so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.